Haki is one of the more confusing aspects of One Piece, and I guarantee that you've seen previous videos that claim they explain Haki but just made it more confusing. This video is not going to be like any of those other videos. In this video, I'm going to be going deep on Haki. I'll be covering its advanced applications, its connection to the personality of characters, things that are not stated to be Haki that fall under its category, how swords relate to the usage of Haki, and every outlier Haki feat that causes confusion in the community, as well as many more topics that cause confusion. This is a video that's been a while in the making for you guys, and with all the blowback I've received on my Kaido and Oden statements, just a reminder, those statements are that Kaido doesn't have full access to future sight and that Oden can't use Conqueror's coding, as well as other Haki discourse going on in the community. This one is going to be well researched, and I'm going to be providing proof for everything I've said, so you guys can't tell me I'm lying to you. And this is going to be the last time I talk about Haki to any of you guys. If I ever have to argue with you guys about Haki again, I'm just going to tell you to watch this video. Before that, however, I will be going over the more basic and technical parts of Haki to make this a general information video, as Haki is quite vast and not really explained very well at times, even with the basic application. One of these aspects being Haki specialization. Haki specialization isn't like Nen or Chakra, because specializing in a certain type of Haki doesn't restrict your usage or proficiency in the other types, and those who specialize in a certain type of Haki can still have worse usage than those who don't specialize in that type. Haki first and foremost is based on willpower. While physical strength does play a role, most clearly in the usage of Conqueror's Haki, a character's will and ambition also play a massive factor. Haki specialization is based on the personality of the user and the things they value, as well as what they use their Haki for. The clearest examples and the first ones given of Haki specialization are Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. Luffy specializes in Conqueror's Haki because he's a dominant figure. He may not have the spirit to conquer others or impose his will on others, but because he has a personality that draws people to him and is such an overwhelming force, he specializes in that form of Haki. Zoro specializes in Armament Haki because while it's not the pure strength type of Haki as that's Conqueror's Haki, it's the more skillful type of pure strength Haki. Techniques such as the breath of all things and creating a black blade are both things that the greatest of swordsmen attain, and Zoro, who desires to be the greatest of the swordsmen, will specialize in the type of Haki that allows him to express his skill most clearly through his swordsmanship. Sanji specializes in observation Haki because he's more in tune with the emotions of others and focuses on minute details quite often. That is something that's more ambiguous, however, because Luffy also has a unique ability to read the emotions of others, and I'd argue his is just as good as Sanji's, but he doesn't specialize in observation Haki. Haki specialization, I believe, is essentially just what your personality fits the greatest, and whatever that is what you specialize in. Characters like Shanks, Roger, and Zebek clearly specialize in Conqueror's Haki. Kobe would specialize in observation Haki. A character like Oden would specialize in Armament Haki. Someone like Whitebeard could specialize in Conqueror's or observation. Mihawk could specialize in Armament or observation, and Garp could specialize in Armament or Conqueror's, and so on and so forth. The fact that specializing in a type of Haki doesn't give you some new technique that others who don't specialize in it can't attain makes it very ambiguous on what the purpose of Haki specialization is, because everyone can attain the same level of skill in each form of it if they simply try hard enough. It's more of a what color is your Bugatti type question, because even if the cars are different colors, we're all still driving the same type of car. It all really just depends on how good you are at driving. Moving on from Haki specialization, now I'll go into the types of Haki. Haki, as I've said already, comes in three basic types, which is Armament, Observation, and Conquerors. To explain in basic terms, Armament makes your body and weapons more durable, and it allows you to deal greater damage. Observation increases your perception and reaction, and it also enhances your emotional perception, and Conquerors is the power to overwhelm those weaker than you. It's technically an insta-win condition against those who have a much weaker will than you do. It's useful in the case that someone who's much weaker than you has a hack's win condition. Let's say that somebody who's a weakling has the gas fruit and can take your oxygen away and defeat you, but because you're so far above them, you can just knock them out with Conqueror's Haki and not have to worry about the ways that they can sneak a win. Haki goes way beyond just these basic usages and goes deep into the advanced application skill tree. Essentially, as far as the story is concerned, everything that is not explained either scientifically or through level fruit is an ability created by Haki. Haki advancement is never really given a clear explanation beyond the ones that we're already familiar with, such as internal destruction, future sight, and Conqueror's coding, but in actuality, there are many different ways to use Haki beyond these basic methods that would also be considered advanced Haki. For example, Shanks' observation killing is an advanced form of Conqueror's Haki. The technique that's going to be used to negate immortality is an advanced form of Conqueror's Haki as well. Generation of elements such as fire and lightning would also be considered an advanced form of Haki. Elemental generation is something that people tend to ignore as far as something that concerns Haki, but it would be considered as such. Luffy's Thor Elephant Gun and his Red Hawk / Red Rock attacks would be consistent with this idea. The reason I use those ones as examples are because they're the easiest ones, and I know how semantical y'all get when you're ready. Advanced Haki is both very clear and also very obscure. Clear in the fact that we know that if it's not basic, it's advanced, and obscure in the fact that there are many methods of advanced Haki. We're never really shown what the transition period between basic and advanced Haki really looks like without already knowing beforehand what the advanced application should look like, which leads to a question that you might have, one I certainly had, which is how does someone learn advanced Haki without knowing beforehand what they're trying to do? few. Methods of Haki advancement are usually explained when we're first introduced to them and are explained in a way that's more, this information has been passed down for years, or it's just the way that I use it. The only time we ever really get an example of when someone just awakens a new version of Haki without being told what they're trying to do is when Luffy and Zoro awaken Conqueror's coding for the first time. When they learned Conqueror's coding, they essentially just replicated what they were feeling from others, and in Zoro's case, Enma forced it out of him. It doesn't really seem like there would be any way to naturally gain a new Haki ability through just training without first seeing it be done by somebody else, which would track with the notion of getting stronger Haki by fighting stronger opponents, because the stronger the opponents you face, the more likely it is that you're gonna fight somebody who has a form of Haki that you haven't accessed yet. But that doesn't really answer the question of how does somebody learn advanced Haki in a vacuum without it ever being introduced to them. So I'm going to headcanon it because Oda really hasn't given us any concrete examples. In the case of Future Sight, I imagine it being similar to when Usopp awakens base observation for the first time. Say you're in a battle and you're facing an opponent that's massively faster than you are. For you to use your observation properly, you would have to be focusing on their movements, their pace, their speed, and trying to process all the information at the same time. If your observation was not only good enough, but your focus and ability to maintain composure was also good enough, you would then be focusing so finely on their movements that you would then be able to predict their next move based off the way that they moved previously. This would be the rough version of Future Sight. Through refinement and practice, you would then be able to catch glimpses of the future, even events that aren't yet to have happened or don't have a predicted pattern to go off of. I really don't know how to explain that last part based off what I just said before, because it will never make sense to me how there's a way to learn how to see the literal future by just focusing really hard and being really calm, but hey. It's going to be a similar thing for advanced armament Haki as well. You try so hard against a strong opponent to block by trying to concentrate your armament Haki into a singular spot that you end up forcing some of it outwards to create a barrier. Once you start mastering the barrier generation technique, you would then try and think to use it offensively to force your Haki past your opponent's defenses, and that's when you master the type of Haki that Luffy used to damage Kaido, which is why Hyogoro considers the barrier generation ability an inferior version of what Luffy needed to master to hurt Kaido, which is why he wasn't able to teach Luffy that version as he himself had never mastered that application. A similar thing would be done for Conqueror's Haki as well, but I don't really know how or why you try concentrating your Conqueror's Haki into a dense enough area to start coating your body with it, since Conqueror's Haki isn't something that you'd ever think to use offensively in the same way you would Armament Haki to begin with. People say that Ryo, the flow technique, is a prerequisite to learning advanced Conquerors, which never really made sense to me personally, but if that is the case, it would make sense because Enma pulled so much of Zoro's Ryo, his Armament Haki, out, and it started pulling out Conqueror's Haki with it because he was so inefficient with using the sword. Advanced Haki, while one of the more interesting aspects of the power system, is also quite confusing when you think about it hard enough, which is just a thing with Haki in general, but this isn't going to be a criticizing Haki video, it's an explaining Haki video. The reason I went over how learning Haki in a vacuum would operate is because I want you all to start thinking about how a character who has never experienced an advanced Haki type would start to learn it. My explanations may not have been the best, but it's a question I want you to ask for yourself because the next section will be going over whether or not somebody can copy Haki. For all of you who went back and forth with me on Oden and Kaido, you guys know where this is going to be leading. Yes, it is possible for you to copy Haki. It's not some Sharingan thing where you're stealing their Haki technique, it's literally just doing what another person does. Luffy did this literally every time he learned an advanced application of Haki for the first time. He literally has to copy Katakuri while learning Future Sight. Thinks back to the way that Rayleigh used Armament Haki in Sabaody and tried replicating that when he was learning advanced Armament Haki, and with Kaido he literally says he starts doing it because he felt the way that Kaido hit him with Conqueror's Haki. This goes into my main point. Kaido stole, copied, since y'all are so literal, Luffy's Future Sight when he used Thieving Dragon Bagua. Kaido in a mode called Thieving Drunk copies Luffy's pattern of using Future Sight and Snake Man. Kaido did this one time and never again. For the people who will now say, well, he used it once, so that means he now always has access to Future Sight, I want to ask you this. If Luffy broke the cuffs against Big Mom and Udon and never trained that type of Haki again after the fact, would you then say he mastered that form of advanced Haki? I don't care what your answer is because Luffy himself can't replicate it and says he can't replicate it until he trains with it more and more and uses it repetitively until he can master it. Let me give you another example since we love examples so much. If Luffy used Future Sight against Katakuri once and never tried to do it again over and over in their fight to get better at it, would Luffy be able to call himself a master of Future Sight? Again, I don't care what your answer is because both Luffy and Katakuri say that 1. Copying him isn't going to make him a master of the technique, and 2. Luffy using Future Sight repetitively caused his usage of it to get better and better. Kaido cannot use Future Sight without being in Thieving Dragon Drunk and copying somebody who already has Future Sight. The mode is literally called Thieving Dragon Drunk. I think it should be obvious that a Thieving Dragon is thieving from others. He literally copies Snake Man's moves and in the moment he switches to that mode, uses Future Sight to start dodging Snake Man when he's literally shown before in double page spread that he couldn't dodge Snake Man. A man that loves to take damage and fights head on, literally at the strongest he can possibly be, is drinking his ass off and switching his emotions to the point that they alter his devil fruit, would never learn future sight naturally. Kaido is literally the opposite of everyone who would learn future sight. He takes damage because he can, and can fight for as long as he wants to against most opponents. Katakuri, Luffy, and Shanks are literally characters who cannot afford to take repetitive damage in battle, because it's either part of their character, not feasible for them in battle, or because taking repetitive damage drains too much of their stamina when their own abilities already drink their stamina to an absurd degree. This is my last time bringing this up. Kaido does not have full access to future sight. But okay, Raftel, he doesn't have future sight, and he is a bum and a fraud for only having one type of advanced Haki, yet calling Haki the greatest power and being a devil fruit merchant on top of that. But what now? Well, now is Oden. But Oden is different from Kaido, because it's not Oden's fault that people think he has ACOG when he doesn't. It's actually Oda's fault. But as a One Piece fan, Oda doesn't make mistakes, so I'll have to take my One Piece fan hat off and use my logical reader hat. Yes, Advanced Conqueror's Haki notation in the manga is very confusing, but it's not as confusing as some of you make it out to be. Now, I'll be going over what exactly Advanced Conqueror's Haki really is. For this, we need logical reasoning and common sense, which I know is a very big ask, but please follow me. Ultiverse Luffy and Onigashima. This is not Conqueror's Haki. I know it looks like Conqueror's Haki, but it's not. The bolts aren't big enough, the streaks aren't big enough, and although you don't want to hear it, the sound effect is not indicative of Conqueror's Haki. Every time somebody is clearly using Conqueror's Haki, you can see the zzzt sound effect or the bzzzt sound effect, which is this hiragana in Japanese. This is the most obvious sign of Conqueror's Haki notation. No one who doesn't have Conqueror's Haki has had the lightning in bold strikes and this notation. I don't care if you can find panels of Luffy using lightning with other notation, because it would just mean that he's using a ton of Armament Haki in that scene. Conqueror's Haki also has the no touch effect as notation, which I'm gonna be honest, that really doesn't mean anything anymore, because even in the most recent chapter, Roger, Garp, and Zebek are all using Conqueror's Haki, and they've clashed and touched multiple times, so I really don't know what that no touch effect really means anymore. But all of that is just to say that when there is a ton of lightning and no ACOG sound effect or touching, we have very clear and obvious signals now that it's simply just Armament Haki until proven otherwise by either an outside statement or a character stating that they're using Conqueror's Haki. This means that now, for the first time in my 19 years of living, I have to backpedal a statement, because although you guys may think I'm a fool, I'm going to be a consistent fool. Luffy's White Star gun on Kizaru, until further noticed, was just a ton of Armament Haki. The only reason I'm backpedaling the statement is for 1, the sake of my consistency, and 2, the sake of my credibility for the video, because I can't let my agenda bias me. Although I would like to say he used Conqueror's coding with White Star gun, there is not consistent notation used here, and logically, if nothing at all proves it's Conqueror's Haki besides the black bolts, then I now have to say that everyone who uses the black bolts is an ACOG user, which is contradicted by the story itself. Kizaru down players, you can take your point. The score is now 1,000,000 to 1 in favor of Kizaru being over Kaido. But what does any of that have to do with Oden? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I was just about to get to that. What this means for Oden is that Oden was not an ACOG user. What? How can that be? Zoro can use ACOG, and Oden was in Kaido's top 5, and everybody else could use Conqueror's coding. He sailed with Rayleigh, Whitebeard, Gabon, Roger, all of whom can use advanced Conqueror's Haki, and I just really want him to have it. It's okay, son, I know. But Oden not having ACOG doesn't hurt your agenda. Oden's mastery of Enma is far greater than Zoro's, first off. The fact that Oden is surprised at the fact that Roger and Whitebeard aren't touching when they use advanced Conquerors is proof that he never got it that way through Enma and Ame no Habakiri. Zoro only got ACOG that way because Enma drew so much of his Zero out because he couldn't use it properly that it started drawing out Conqueror's Haki too. That's literally what he does against Kaido and Ashura, because he uses Enma at max output and it pulls out some of his Conqueror's Haki too. Second off, the only point in his life that Oden would have ever experienced advanced Conqueror's Haki in the canon story, none of the headcanon sparring on the ship with Roger and Whitebeard, is when he sees it for the first time when Roger hits him with Kamusari and when he sees it with Roger and Whitebeard. The fact that he did not take note of any of those times in a serious manner is proof that neither of those moments registered to him as something that he could learn, because he's more shocked at what he's seeing than he is curious about if he can replicate that himself. 3. The Roger Pirates don't fight anyone at all between Oden joining the crew and Oden leaving the crew, so you can't tell me that he'd see Roger, Rayleigh, and Gabon using it and ask them them what that is to learn it. 4. He never used it against Kaido in the throne room, because what you would be seeing there would just be Armament Haki, because you literally see them making contact in that clash and you never see any Conqueror's Haki notation. As well as the fact that we never see Oden use it at all against Kaido in their final fight, which is further proof that Oden doesn't have it, because he didn't have it then and he ain't gonna be using it now. Togen Totsuka is not a Conqueror's Haki attack. We know what Emma looks like when Conqueror's Haki is streaking off of it, and it never looks that way when Oden is using it. It is very clear and very obvious when it's being shown. If Oda did anything in the Oden flashback, it was make it very clear when somebody's using Armament Haki Lightning and when somebody's using Conqueror's Haki Lightning, and Oden never does anything that even remotely resembles Conqueror's Haki Lightning. Point 5. The mere fact that the scabbards can even replicate Togen Totsuka is proof that Togen Totsuka is not a Conqueror's Haki attack. Let's use the Shanks and Kamusari example. Shanks is the only Roger pirate stated to be able to master Kamusari. Kamusari, being a Conqueror's Haki attack, is something that could not be replicated by somebody like Buggy or the other Roger pirates who don't possess Conqueror's Haki. The second half of that argument would then be the skill argument, which is what Rayleigh and Gabayon fall into, since they do have Conqueror's Haki coding, which is irrelevant to the Haki discussion I'm making right now. If you do not have ACOG, you cannot replicate an ACOG attack. Togen Totsuka is an Armament Haki attack. That's why Kaido says the scabbards don't cut as deep as Oden does, because they don't have as much Armament Haki as Oden. The reason the scabbards can't use Anman Amino Habakiri is because they don't have as much Armament Haki as Oden and Zoro, and the swords would kill them because it would draw out too much of their Armament Haki. That's why the only people who have ever scarred Kaido are Oden and Zoro. And guess what? Neither of them used ACOG when they did scar Kaido. I think we're on point 6 now. Oden being in Kaido's top 5 fighters does not automatically mean that he needs to have Conqueror's coding because they have it. The same reason why being in a group of characters in One Piece doesn't automatically make you the same as everybody else. This meme, this one right here, is exactly what Oda is saying with Oden and Kaido's top 5. Now going even deeper into this rabbit hole, I want to talk about swords and Haki. I hear this joke about Shanks, about how he's a Haki wizard using his sword as a Haki wand to channel his Haki attacks. And unironically, that's essentially what swords are in the One Piece world. The importance of swords in One Piece as far as it concerns Haki is mainly to serve as a method for a character to channel their Haki through. We see this with the Breath of All Things, Shanks' attack on Green Bull, and it's hinted at with Black Blades as well. The channeling aspect of Haki is an advanced variation of the technique. With Ryo being considered the flow of Armament Haki in Wano and that being the advanced version of basic Armament Haki, it stands to reason that the flow of Haki and the coding of Haki are both also advanced applications as well. Being able to coat your blade in Haki would take a significant degree of training, as we see with Zoro and Mihawk. It's implied that coating his blades with Haki is the only thing that Mihawk taught Zoro in the 2 years they were training, as we have yet to see Zoro look back to Mihawk's time teaching him for anything else other than that, which while it may not seem impressive in the grand scheme of things, it would be a major milestone for Zoro because it's Mihawk teaching him the prerequisite skill needed for the creation of a black blade. The black coating of Haki on a weapon is something that we rarely ever see if you look back on it. To my recollection, the only characters I ever remember seeing do it are Nasjiro, Fujitora, the swordsman of Wano, Roger Whitebeard, and that's about it as far as swords go. With Mihawk's statement being that anyone can create a black blade when he speaks about Zoro's blades not breaking against him if they were coated with Haki, it seems that the infusion of Haki into a sword is the main prerequisite needed for creating a black blade, which would explain why there are only 2 in recorded history so far, as it seems like the infusion of the solid black coating of a blade is very rare among swordsmen. Now this goes into something else entirely which I'm going to be sidetracked by, and that's the black armament hardening versus the invisible armament hardening. Haki can be invisible post time skip, we've seen it numerous times, most clearly with swordsmen and sword users, but let me give you a few examples. Luffy grabbing Caesar without using the black coating of armament Haki would be invisible armament Haki coating. The axe user in Dressrosa who broke his sword off of Kelly Funk's brother's back is using invisible armament hardening because he says that the blade he was using broke even though it was covered in Haki, and we know what it looks like later in that same arc when black armament Haki is being used. Most swordsmen who know Haki can't use the black coating of it in their blades but can use the invisible coating of it. Unless we're saying that characters like Big Mom and Law just don't infuse Armament Haki into their blades at all, which doesn't make sense narratively. Armament Haki, I can't stress this enough, is not only invisible in the pre-time skip, it's also invisible in the post-time skip, and that version of Haki would be the most inferior version possible of Armament Haki. It's basically like using Takai while still being able to move. You're simply just a lot harder. The next stage up from invisible Armament Haki coating would then be the black Armament Haki coating, and beyond that would be Armament Haki infusion, beyond that would be barrier generation, generation, and further beyond that would be essentially what is considered the breath of all things, which is the ability to bypass the durability of anything while also being able to create a barrier. This is the ability to cut what you want to cut and not cut what you want to cut. Like I said previously in my copying Haki portion, the fact that Zoro never trains the breath of all things despite using it in Alabasta doesn't mean that he was a full master of this advanced form of Haki through the entire pre-time skip. Zoro uses the breath of all things in Alabasta and he doesn't use it ever again until he masters it in Wano. Going back to swords again, the channeling of black armament Haki into a blade being so rare among the top swordsmen of the world would then lead to other things that would then cause the creation of a black blade to be extremely rare. The first hurdle to jump would be Haki infusion. The next hurdle to jump would more than likely be the mastering of the flow of Haki, which is Ryo. With Wano being the land of swordsmen and the breath of all things being essentially the peak technique that a swordsman can master as the ability to cut and not cut what you wish, it stands to reason that this ability would play some role in the creation of a black blade, especially with Mihawk's Yoro being stated to be able to cut through anything. The hurdle after mastering the infusion of Haki and the breath of all things would more than likely then be the possession of Conqueror's coding. This is another reason why I don't believe Oden has Conqueror's Haki coding, but I'll explain that later after I go over the next and final hurdle. Armament Haki alone cannot be the only thing that creates a black blade, otherwise there would have to be either a large number of black blades out there, or a swordsman on Nosjuro or Fujitora's level should also be able to create a black blade, seeing as both possess a supreme grade blade and both logically would have the infusion technique of Haki and more than likely also the breath of all things. I know some of you are looking at me sideways for saying that Nosjuro doesn't have Conqueror's coding, but that's another point entirely that I'll be going into later concerning Imo and Joyboy's Haki. With Zoro now getting Conqueror's Haki coding and Emma being stated to have the potential to become a black blade in his hands, it stands to reason that him awakening Conqueror's Haki coding will be the final Haki hurdle that he needs to jump to create a black blade. Enma, in my opinion, is going to be the first blade that Zoro turns into a black blade because it's going to be the one that jumps the final hurdle first, and that final hurdle being a vast combat history and multiple years of infusion in battle. Enma has the greatest high-level battle history out of any of the swords that Zoro possesses currently because it not only has Zoro's battle history, but it also has Oden's battle history. Oden has essentially beaten every great swordsman who was alive on Wano during his lifetime, and then went to go on to clash with Roger and Whitebeard as well as Kaido afterwards, and Emma would then taste Kaido's blood again, defeat King, defeat Lucci, and clash with Nosjuro all in Zoro's hands. I believe it's being set up that there are multiple prerequisites for creating a black blade, and that in total you need to have mastery over the infusion of the black coating of Armament Haki into a blade, which is why Mihawk spent 2 years teaching Zoro that, mastery of the breath of all things, which is what Zoro learns in Wano, the ability to coat and infuse one's blade with Conqueror's coating, which is why Zoro gained that with Enma, and a large history of high-level battle with the blade. Once all of these are combined, the blade then has the potential to now become a black blade because you've been forcing high amounts of Haki into it for a long period of time. Oden not possessing Conqueror's Haki coating would be the reason why Emma has not yet become a supreme grade blade, despite Oden having the other 3 prerequisites. Oden was such a legendary swordsman that if he did know Conqueror's coating, he would then be considered as the world's greatest swordsman of his era and have turned both Enma and Amino Habakiri into black blades. But what about Whitebeard and Roger? Based on the prerequisites that I've stated, they should have black blades as well. Well, no, actually, they didn't jump all those hurdles, they've only jumped 3 of them as well. The last one that they haven't jumped yet is a high level of battle history. Both Roger and Whitebeard wouldn't have had the battle history that Oden, Mihawk, or even Ryuma would logically possess, as Oden, Mihawk, and Ryuma were going around constantly beating every strong swordsman they could, until they became the best in their respective areas. Whitebeard actively avoids conflict. His battle history logically wouldn't be on the same level of that of Oden, Mihawk, and Ryuma. Roger, however, should logically be able to create a black blade since we know he fights actively during the period before God Valley, but the only people he fights with are the same people repetitively over and over again. Which leads to another thing I'm gonna get sidetracked on, which is the concept of Haki blooming. One question I have about Haki blooming is if it's like Zenkai boosts in Dragon Ball where you can just spam it over and over again against the same people. I don't think so personally, because then that would mean that Roger and Garp should have never had any comparable fighters to them after God Valley besides each other, and the Haki of the older fighters in the verse shouldn't get weaker over time. I mean, if Haki blooms work like Zenkai, then Roger and Garp should basically just steamroll the entire verse and have Joyboy and Emu level Haki. These two are stated by Roger to have nearly killed each other numerous times over their lives, meaning that logically they should have insane Haki clashes every time. The times that Luffy has nearly died fighting someone and gotten a Haki bloom from it would be against Katakuri and Kaido, where he was so outmatched that they logically should have been able to kill him at any point they wanted to if this wasn't Luffy's story. Those are both the times where Luffy blooms a new form of Haki, and actually even Udon too. Luffy blooms advanced armament Haki when he feels he's about to die, which is why Hyogoro then makes him fight Big Mom to try and draw out the same level of stress. This is all to say that Haki blooms in the heat of battle, which has already been explained. But I feel haki only blooms in the heat of battle when it's a new battle experience. If Roger and Garp fought to the death in God Valley, I don't think either would have gotten a haki bloom from that because they've been constantly fighting at that level for years and years prior to that point. There's nothing new for them to gain from fighting each other. It's like the plateau in strength gains you have when you go to the gym. It's much easier to get your weight up when you're first starting out, but once you've been doing it for 7 to 10 years, you just stop making any noticeable increases despite pushing yourself just as hard. Oden, Mihawk, and Ryuma were actively seeking out new people to fight every time until they beat absolutely everybody they could. Now, this begs another question. Does fighting a bunch of fodder count since you're fighting different people? Again, I don't think so. Using the weightlifting example, it's like lifting way below your actual baseline and progressively overloading from there. You'd be lifting for a year before you actually caught up to a weight that was challenging for you. Oden was always a monster, yes, but the swordsmen of Wano were no slouches either. It's more than likely the case that Oden struggled with those fights back then when he was young, which is why it counts towards Emma becoming a Black Blade as he was being challenged enough for his haki to bloom, but as he got older, he just gapped everyone in the country by far. Same thing with Mihawk. We know Mihawk was very young when he was considered world famous, as he's been a renowned swordsman even before the Great Pirate Era. Mihawk sails around actively looking for new challenges, which is why he built up a large enough battle history to turn Yoru into a Black Blade, and by the time he did that, he gapped the rest of the verse so hard that people who would have been a challenge to him at one point in his life were no longer serious challenges for him. For example, he and Vista had never fought till Marineford, but because of all the battles that Mihawk had fought leading up to Vista, by the time he got to Vista, he was stronger than he would have been at a point in his life where Vista would have been an actual challenge for him because he had more than likely already fought someone on Vista's level before. The creation of a Black Blade has been something in the background, but with how late into the series we're getting, I think this is the best explanation for it logically. That explains why characters like Roger, Whitebeard, and Shanks don't have Black Blades and why someone like Fujitora and Nosujiro don't have one either. In Roger, Whitebeard, and Shanks' case, it's because they don't have a long history of battle with new opponents that challenge their skills constantly and just fight the same people at the top of the verse repetitively, and in Fujitora and Nosujiro's case, they may possess the battle history and armament requirements but not Conqueror's coding. And now I hear you say, but Nosujiro does have Conqueror's haki, and to that I say, does he really though? Is it Nosujiro's own Conqueror's haki or is it Imu's Conqueror's haki? Because I'm getting to the point where I don't think any of the Gorosei besides maybe Garling had Conqueror's haki before they became the Gorosei. A new level of haki we were introduced to in Egghead by Joyboy is permanent Conqueror's haki infusion. This is different to the permanent Armament haki infusion that the Black Blades display. With this ability, a person can essentially store the rawest amount of their own Conqueror's haki into an object permanently. We have no idea how this works as of right now. My assumption is either it's the same as a Black Blade where you just repetitively pour large amounts of Conqueror's haki into an object over time, or it might have something to do with just pouring a large amount of Conqueror's haki into a single thing, and then whatever the thing you poured into is, it then becomes a conduit for your Conqueror's haki. It's essentially like putting a piece of iron into an electromagnet and inducing a magnetic field. The reason I say the Gorosei don't have Conqueror's haki of their own is simply because they don't have the abilities of their own either. They're literally just using Imu's power. Imu has Conqueror's haki, from what we see based off its range in Elbaf anyway, that should be equal to Joyboy's haki not in Egghead when he's using it in Gunko's body. If Gunko's body can restrict his Conqueror's haki, I don't see why it would because Imu himself is in her body, but let's say for the argument that it does, then it would just be the same as Joyboy's haki knot where he's just infusing his haki into Gunko and using her as a conduit. This would be the same idea with the Gorosei. Imu is basically giving them his Conqueror's haki to use the same way he gives them the abilities to use as well. This is why they all eat Conqueror's haki when they arrive in the summoning circle, because that circle is a result of Imu's ability. If Nosujiro does not possess Conqueror's haki of his own, then he would not be able to infuse his Armament haki into a Black Blade and turn it black as he's doing it with somebody else's Conqueror's haki. That, or he simply doesn't have a long enough battle history for it to be possible if he does have Conqueror's haki, which is a lot less likely in my opinion than him simply just not having Conqueror's haki of his own. You know, it's actually crazy how deep I could get into haki off of just talking about swords. It's almost like swords and haki are related in some way. But despite how long this video has gone on, there are still more things to cover on haki even beyond this point, and one of those things is what exactly is haki? Is it life force, is it spiritual energy, or is it something else entirely? We know that haki is called willpower, but even people with weak willpower can still have haki, so it's clearly not how hard you're willing to press on in difficult circumstances. The reason I'm asking this question is because of something that Luffy has shown us, and that is the ability to run out of haki to the point you can't use any more of it. This is weird. It's very weird because Luffy is the only character who we've ever seen run out of haki. The reason it's even weirder is because of Enma and Zoro. We know that when Enma uses up so much of your haki that it takes all of it, it kills you, implying that running out of haki should kill you. Yet Luffy runs out of haki all the time, when he's in Gear 4, and he even runs out of haki numerous times in the same battle. And if it works that way with Gear 5 too, where he runs out of haki when he gets out of the form, then it's just another oddity. I personally don't know what haki is. It's clearly not life force seeing as Luffy can run out of haki, so it's more than likely really just spiritual energy, but if it is spiritual energy, then I don't know why Enma can kill someone because they run out of Haki. And before someone says it's not that Luffy runs out of Haki completely, it's just that he runs out of enough Haki for Luffy to not be able to use Gear 4. No, it's not that. Luffy just simply becomes completely incapable of using Armament Haki because him using Armament Haki to block Rebecca from killing Viola is what signaled to Doflamingo that his Haki returned, which makes it seem like Doflamingo has also seen people run out of Haki before or has run out of Haki himself, meaning it shouldn't be something that only Luffy can do. Enma would be the outlier in this circumstance because it makes more sense for people to be able to still survive running out of Haki the same way characters survive running out of Ki in Dragon Ball than it does for them to die after running out of Haki the way that the character dies if they run out of chakra in Naruto. It might have something to do with Enma and Enma being a hellish figure in Japanese culture. Maybe Enma sucking out all of your soul causes you to never be able to get it back because now it's trapped in the blade or something, and the only way to bypass it is to be strong enough to pull your soul back out of the gates of hell, which is why Zoro calls himself the King of Hell because he has now tamed Enma. I really don't have an answer for this one. This video might end up confusing you more than it does explaining things to you, but the reason I think this is going to be the last Haki video you'll ever have to watch is because I go over everything concerning Haki in this video. Most Haki videos just go over the basics and skip all the obscure side pieces no one remembers, but as somebody who reads the story and has a decent enough memory of it, I can talk about a lot of the stuff that goes on concerning Haki that most people might not be familiar with. Also because I speak with you guys enough to know the things that confuse you. In summary, Haki would just be spiritual energy the same way it is with Ki in Dragon Ball, and the reason we only ever see Luffy run out of Haki is because Luffy uses his Haki in such an inefficient way in Gear 4 compared to everybody else in the series. Now moving on to the final portion of the video, I have what you've all been waiting for. It's impossible to make a Haki video without talking about Mr. Haki Man himself, Shanks. Shanks doesn't break Haki in any way, but he shows us that there are a lot more ways to use it than the stuff that we're always shown. I've said it a few times before in this video, but Haki is essentially like Ki in Dragon Ball. Everything you see done with Ki in Dragon Ball should be possible with Haki, except maybe flight and the multiform technique. Haki lasers should be possible. We essentially see it with Shanks' Conqueror's Haki on Wano, where he projects it outward using Griffin to pinpoint Green Bull from the mainland. In all honesty, what's stopping someone from using a flying Shagan and infusing it with Haki to essentially create a death beam type attack? Haki projection is something we've already seen done with Conqueror's Haki because you project it outwards. What's stopping someone from being so skilled with flowing their Haki that they're able to create objects with it and project it out like they're a Green Lantern or making weapons out of it like Krillin does with Destructo Disc or Vegeta's Spirit Sword? Shanks lets us realize that Oda is holding out a lot on Haki. You know that Griffin projection that the anime added when Shanks was using Kamusari? Shanks should legitimately be able to do that in the canon of the manga based off how we see him project his Haki if he can shape it into different things. I'll also touch on him being able to kill Future Sight with Conqueror's Haki just because it's a technique he possesses related to Haki, and for the sake of a comprehensive video, I have to include it. Essentially, Shanks just terrifies whoever he's fighting with his Conqueror's Haki to the point where they can't stay calm while fighting him, and thus can't use Future Sight because you need to be calm while using the ability. It's not that crazy of an ability if I'm being honest with you. Most characters should be able to kill Future Sight if they project enough of their Conqueror's Haki outwards to someone else. Oda holds back a lot on what can be done with Haki because in my opinion, he doesn't want to blur the line between Haki and Devil Fruits. What's the point of having a Devil Fruit ability if they can only do one thing concerning that ability when Haki can do basically everything the user can imagine? Haki is something that is held back because Oda has already had an established power system by the time it got fully introduced. It's essentially just a gap bridger for those who don't have Devil Fruits to compete with those who do, which gets into something else that Haki can do, which is kill Devil Fruit abilities. I'm going to try and find an explanation as to why strong enough Haki can kill Devil Fruit abilities and which abilities can be killed by Haki and which ones can't. Caesar's gas fruit shouldn't be able to be killed by Haki unless you're turning his body intangible. Removing the oxygen from the air isn't something that's Devil Fruit specific. Haki shouldn't allow you to be able to breathe in space, so it shouldn't be able to stop Caesar from taking someone's oxygen away no matter how strong they are. Same thing with his gas abilities affecting the psychology of your own body. If Katakuri can't resist being manipulated because of his gas, I don't think anyone in the verse should be able to, because Katakuri has a massive gap between him and Caesar as far as Haki is concerned, so if it can work on him, it should work on anyone unless there's a threshold of Haki you personally have to attain before you can start negating Devil Fruits, and it's not a relative thing where it's how strong is my Haki in relation to your Haki. This takes me now to Law and Sugar. Haki negating Devil Fruits was created for these two characters, and I stand by that wholeheartedly. These are the only two abilities where they're in instant win condition against anyone, which is why Haki negating Devil Fruits has been introduced into the story. Law says he can't use certain abilities against Big Mom and Kaido because their Haki is too strong. That leads to the question, is it a circumstance where Law's Haki is a 1 and theirs is a 10, and the gap of 9 is too great for Devil Fruits to bypass their Haki, or is it a circumstance of their Haki is a 10 when Devil Fruit abilities stop working against characters that have their Haki at a 5, so anyone above 5 just doesn't have Devil Fruit abilities work on them? The first circumstance leads to the idea that if Law's Haki was strong enough, he should essentially be able to use every Devil Fruit ability he has on Kaido and Big Mom, since the gap is no longer as massive, meaning he can switch their souls, cut them into pieces, take their hearts, etc. Same thing with Sugar. If her Haki got strong enough in this instance, she would also be able to turn them into toys with just a touch. The second instance, however, supposes that no matter how strong Law or Sugar's Haki gets, there are certain abilities they have that will just never work on someone with a certain level of Haki, regardless of if you have more Haki than that person or not. We really don't know. Based on how Imu is moving in the current manga, it seems as though it should be the first option, as Imu can turn a character like Zebek into a slave using his ability, but it took longer for Zebek to fully turn than it did for the Giants, implying that Zebek's Haki was strong enough to allow him to resist for a certain period of time. If this is the case, that would essentially make Law the most overpowered character in One Piece by the time the series is over, if he does get Haki blooms, because now Law can do anything to anyone in his room, and his rooms are now as big as Onigashima, meaning he could turn his room on and you wouldn't even know you're in it because it's so massive. Until Imu's ability gets explained further, that's going to be the assumption that has to be made, which then begs the question of how big of a gap do you need to have for the Haki negation to take effect, which we more than likely are never going to get an answer to because Oda isn't thinking that hard about it. Next, however, I also want to ask which abilities work against Haki and which ones don't. The simple answer is whichever abilities Oda doesn't want to work, but that's boring. Based off the track record of the story, it seems like abilities that have a tangible effect or create a physical property do work regardless of Haki. For example, Luffy being able to turn anyone's body into rubber. This again might just be because he has such strong Haki in year 5 that it works on anyone, but I think it's being set up that the ability should work on absolutely everyone Luffy fights, including someone like Imu. When Luffy turns you into rubber, he's bestowing a physical property onto you. It's not like Law switching souls or taking out someone's heart, where he's doing something outside of the laws of reality entirely. It's more likely for your body to take on the properties of rubber than it is for my soul to jump out into your body, or for me to survive without my heart in my chest. Same thing with Kid. Kid is actually a better example than Luffy in this instance because Kid and Law should have relative Haki, yet Kid's magnetism property works on Big Mom, which is him bestowing a property onto her without physically interacting with her, when certain techniques that Law has don't work the same way and have no effect. It's because bestowing magnetism is a physical property that is more likely to happen in reality, so Haki negation doesn't work the same way on it. I do plan on making a Devil Fruits Explain video in the same vein as this one, looking at the upper limits of awakenings and going a bit further into different techniques that can be used, but I'm gonna be honest, that's way down the content pipeline for right now. Now, to end out the video, the last thing I'm going to mention is massive Haki. I recently did a poll to see the concepts I needed to go in depth on to explain in this video, so I can at least catch most of you guys with some new info, and it seems like massive Haki is the most confusing aspect to you guys. This is understandable as it was just stated recently in chapter 1165, so in our minds it's new, but as somebody said in one of my comments, shout out to that guy because I didn't even think about it until you said it, but massive Haki is shown with Shisui in Thriller Bark, as Zoro makes mention of both the weight and hardness of the blade. Haki is both spiritual and physical. It's the physical manifestation of a user's own spirit, which is why the stronger your body grows and the greater your spirit grows, the more powerful your Haki will become. Massive Haki is essentially just how much Haki do you have. When Roger and Garp use a greater mass of Haki, they're essentially just using a greater mass for their attacks. Mass in One Piece is usually correlated with more powerful attacks. Zoro mastering Shisui, which is a heavier blade, allows him to use stronger attacks. Mihawk's blade, being a great sword and also a black blade, should realistically have the greatest mass of any blade we've been shown so far, which is why him mastering it allows him to produce such powerful slashes. I want to mention something again that I brought up in a poll, which is Mihawk and Shanks' relative power. For clarification, because Oda helped me out by introducing massive Haki, what I'm saying is that Shanks and Mihawk should have a comparable massive Haki, which would mean they are physically comparable in terms of power, but Mihawk's skill and usage of the ability gives him an edge in battle, which is why he's considered a stronger swordsman. Another poll I made is the explanation of this idea. A Big Mom with Mihawk's sword skill would be considered by us to be stronger than a Big Mom without Mihawk's sword skill, even though they're literally the exact same character with the exact same stats, minus the skill difference. Characters like Kaido and Big Mom should have an absolutely insane massive Haki, which is actually evidence to us, but their technical usage of it should lack less finesse than those characters who we consider stronger than them, like say Shanks or Mihawk. We know Conqueror's Haki grows with the user's physical strength. As Luffy gets stronger, his Conqueror's Haki gets stronger. This is evidenced in Wano as he keeps breaking through his ceiling until he gets to gear 5th and his body is absolutely just covered in Conqueror's Haki. Haki mass isn't too complicated of an idea. Heavier punches are more powerful and you can hit harder because your fist becomes more durable. This is why pouring more Armament Haki into an attack creates a stronger attack, shown by Kobe and Zoro. Haki is a very confusing power system. While some people make it more confusing than it has to be, you can't really blame them because it's easy to make something that's confusing seem even more confusing. You probably left this video with a lot more questions and answers and probably think I did an awful job at explaining it, but as long as one person thinks I did a good job, that's all I really need. I hope you guys left this video knowing more about the different ways that Haki can be used and everything that Haki has been shown to be able to do so far in the story. We're now getting more and more techniques for Haki and Elbaf, so this video will probably become redundant in a few months, but hey, the video is made when the video is made. The reason I didn't go over the Conqueror's Haki technique used to negate immortality is because we actually haven't seen it as yet, because despite Gabon saying it's possible, no character has actually negated the regeneration ability of the Holy Knights Gorosei and Imu. Not even Joyboy's his Haki has been able to do, because while he did disintegrate the Gorosei, they just got sent straight back to Marijoa, even though they were actually on Egghead. Once that ability gets revealed to us, however, it's going to be so clear what it actually is that it doesn't even really need to have a video made on it for you to be able to understand. But that's all I have for the Haki explanation video. 3 weeks in the making and 40 minutes long. If you enjoyed the video and you got something from it, let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your thoughts on what it takes to create a Black Blade? What is the most insane thing you can think of that could logically be done with Haki based on what we see in the story? And who do you think will have the best tentacle usage of all forms of Haki by the end of the story? When I ask that question, I'm not talking about who will have the strongest Haki, but who will be able to use the most techniques with it and have the most advanced properties with all forms of Haki. If you enjoyed the video, as always, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more high quality One Piece content. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.